Welcome to another edition of Florida Newsmakers. I'm Alia Faraj Johnson with our very special guest, Education Commissioner Tony Bennett. Commissioner, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start off with the state of education in Florida. We've actually seen some strong improvements.
Well, there's no question. I really believe this. Florida is the state that virtually all other states has looked to. They have all looked to Florida in terms of how do you put together a reform initiative that systematically improves student performance, reduces achievement gaps. Florida's work in improving graduation rates, improving performance among our Latin American population, our minority population, our African American population, been exemplary. Just external ratings. If we look at the National Council of Teacher Quality, we look at EdWeek, two very well-respected sources who at one time had us at the bottom of the heap. They've now moved us very close to the top. So Florida has a lot to be proud of, and we still have a lot of work to do.
So what do you think has brought about the success rate in the last decade? Like, what has worked?
Well, again, I want to go back to the fact that I think Florida was bold, and it did many things that most other states didn't really think about doing at the time that they did them. A through F grading is something that is catching on around the country. Third grade reading and the emphasis on literacy is catching on around the country. School choice is catching on around the country. And those are all things Florida did. So, but the one thing Florida does that no other state has really replicated has been the incredible use of data and the phenomenal wealth of data that Florida keeps, aggregates, and disaggregates.
Which allows us to keep monitoring the achievement, success of students.
Data-driven decision-making.
What works and what doesn't work.
Exactly.
Now, with all these improvements, why move to the Common Core state standards? What is that going to do to education?
Well, first, I have a very simple answer to that, and I guess I'll pose it back as a question. In the current arrangement where you have 50 different states and 50 different sets of standards, and we all like to compare ourselves to each other, how do we do that? But in that arrangement where you have 50 different states and 50 different sets of standards and 50 different tests, who gets rich? The assessment companies. Yep. And what we have lost in this discussion is the idea of what is truly college and career ready. What is it? What is it that enables Florida? And Governor Scott has been eloquent about the need for skilled workforce and bringing skilled workforce to Florida.
Which has been one of his top
Absolutely.
focuses.
So how do we utilize our education system to make sure all of our children are college and career ready? And that's where Common Core comes in. I always say this. With Common Core, I believe this. In 5 years, if you were to interview me, we would no longer be having the discussion that we hear so much throughout many states around the country, and that is teachers teaching to the test. Because Common Core is going to teach children to critically solve problems, analyze, use data, use information to formulate their beliefs, and really read and articulate text at a very complex level.
But Commissioner, what are parents going to see, or what are students going to see that will be different? How will Common Core make a difference in the classroom?
Sure, it's a great question because I believe this Common Core is transformative at 3 different levels. It's transformative in terms of what our students will learn. Our students will become those critical problem solvers like I mentioned. But if you're going to do that, you have to transform teaching. And a good way to say this, if I say we're not going to be teaching to the test, I believe what you're going to see is you're going to see math and English language arts teachers teaching like music and art teachers. We are going to reinsert creativity back into the classrooms. We're going to reinsert interdisciplinary instructions, and we're going to see teachers enjoy their jobs like never before and challenge students like never before.
So, critics out there, I mean, we hear one side of the Common Core state standards and how important they are to transforming, modernizing our system, our education system. But the critics out there say this is a cram down from the federal government. Address some of those concerns. FCAT versus Common Core. Are we transitioning to something new? Is this something that's improved and better?
Sure. Let's talk about the first piece first. Let's talk about the idea is who's cramming this. And it's not being crammed. First of all, let's talk about the role of standards. Standards are just that. I mean, they are the level at which we expect our students to perform. And these standards, there are fewer of those. They are much clearer, and they require our students to function at a much deeper level. But these are state-driven. As the former chief of Indiana, I was intimately involved in the development of the standards. Our department was intimately involved in the development of standards, and we took the standards through the statutory process to adopt those. I would also tell you the most vital thing that's important is how we assess the standards.
And that is one of the top questions. So.
Sure. And there are two consortia. Many folks have heard me talk about a Plan B, and that's a fair question. I think we have to, in Florida, make sure we choose the best assessment for Florida's children. Not an assessment that was developed just because it was part of a consortium under Race to the Top, but an assessment that truly helps us define whether our students are mastering the standards at the level they need to be college and career ready.
And very quickly, DOE has been putting on teacher training courses over the summer. What are you hearing from teachers about Common Core? And then a final question about school grades.
Well, the one thing I will tell you is no one in education has a more credible voice to parents than teachers. And I would challenge a parent who is watching to go ask their teacher, their child's teacher, how they feel about Common Core, because universally the teachers believe this puts teaching back the way they believe they should do it, which is challenging students to their highest level and our students becoming critical problem solvers.
And Commissioner, with the new standards, by raising standards, we might actually see school grades dropping. How do you address that?
Well, if I may, let's not talk about school grades. Let's talk about overall performance.
Okay.
Because we have to remember that if I said we're going to be leaving teaching to the test and we're going to be assessing critical problem solving, what that means is we're going to be challenging our students in a way we've never seen before. So yes, we will likely see some performance drops, because we're asking our students to operate at a much higher level that will enable them to be much more competitive in the 21st century. Our job is, as we transition from FCAT and our current measurements for school accountability, is that we transition that to when we get to the Common Core assessment so that we correlate the accountability system accordingly. So that we don't end up asking ourselves, did our kids just do worse today, or did our teachers do a worse job teaching? That's not the discussion. The discussion is we're asking our students and teachers to do something vastly different than they've ever done it. And we have to adjust the state systems to that.
Commissioner, with that, we have to close the show, but we need to have you come back on to talk about Common Core state standards. I know it's a conversation that will be ongoing. Our viewers, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.